Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, LinkedIn Live. We're like, good morning, Matt. How you doing?
Yeah, morning. First LinkedIn Live. There you go. So you've got me for the first time doing a LinkedIn Live. I think. No, second. I'm lying. Sorry, Tony Horn. It's my second. Sorry, I liked my second. I forgot that. But
Tony,
still, yeah.
Tony. It's not that it was forgettable. It's just
Oh no.
that Matt didn't remember.
It was. Believe me, it wasn't forgettable. I fell off a treadmill while presenting. It was definitely rememberable. That's why I'm sat down this morning. Don't
Okay,
ask.
okay. Actually, Matt, you're making me think that I need to step up my my LinkedIn Live game. If he had you live on a treadmill, what am I doing? Just having you sat on a seat.
It's only because I couldn't
Yeah.
get the camera angles right this morning that I'm sat down. Don't worry, it's not a you thing. It's a me.
Yeah, next time. So next
Yeah,
time, folks, for those of you that listening, it'll be Matt live on a treadmill.
yeah. Full Mr.
So good
Motivator.
good morning to anybody that's listening. Matt, you've increased the energy levels already. I'm not going to lie. We were just talking about how our weeks have been
Yeah.
um off air. We've both been quite busy, in terms of here, there, and everywhere. And I must admit, I was feeling quite tired coming to this. But I tell you what, you know what? You've raised my energy levels already. We're
Well, you see,
1 minute in.
the past comes back to haunt me. Yeah, we were talking about previous careers, and that's where that comes in. Always raise the roof.
Yeah. So those that don't know Matt Gupwell, I mean, we connected a couple of months ago, and that was quite serendipitous because you're using the word serendipity,
Yeah,
off air, but actually that was a serendipitous meeting because obviously I was due to be connecting with the amazing Sunaina,
yeah,
and she was meeting you anyway, and we
yeah.
both met, and it was we were sat talking for hours, weren't we? Literally the three of us.
Yeah, it was the most of the afternoon sat in Birmingham
Yeah,
having a final conversation, and yeah, you're right. It as the world says, it's funny who you meet when you
it is.
you allow it to happen, and it was a really
Yeah,
nice chance to catch up with Sunaina
yeah,
and meet you,
yeah.
and kind of go, other people think like this. This is
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. And making, do you know what, as well, thinking back to that meeting, but making time and space for those kind of like in-person connections, those random coffee meetings,
Yeah,
maybe with people that you've only connected with on LinkedIn, etc. That's just reminding me that I've got some messages in my inbox of people wanting a coffee and I must get back to them. But yeah, it's you never know where that conversation is going to take you and what you're going to learn from it, and etc. So yeah, really, really pleased to be having this conversation
oh,
today,
Andy.
Matt. So let's just start at the beginning in terms of, I know, one of my first questions is how did you get to here? Just tell us a little bit about, your journey to here and how you've ended up, why we're having this conversation around
Okay.
neurodiversity, how you've ended up in that space.
Let's do the me summary and then the why neurodiversity summary. So
Okay.
I turned 50 in January, which I'm still in denial about. So
Embrace
started,
it.
yeah.
You've joined my decade, Matt.
I
Embrace it.
know, I
Right.
know, I know. I'm getting there. So where am I? Between sort of 17 and a half, 18, that's when I did the whole finish college. I now need to get
Yeah.
a job, get a career. Um, Between 18 and 36, I really tried very hard to have the career. And by very hard, I
Okay.
mean I had 35 jobs, was sacked 30
Wow.
times, quit the other five, and couldn't make sense of why I had so many jobs and why that wasn't what everyone else did, and saw
Yeah.
peers surpassing me and everything else.
Yeah.
So by the time I got to 36, sacked again from a sales job that I hated because I was too honest. Sort of
Yeah.
autistic honesty. I couldn't lie to people and say you can afford this when I knew they couldn't.
Yeah.
I kind of went backwards a bit, and I'm saying to my wife, then we had two young kids.
Mhm.
My wife was supporting our children, which I'll come on to. And I said, the
Mm.
only thing I know how to do, you talk about energy, was
Mm.
entertain. It's all I'd done on the side since I was 17. I'd been a busker. I'd
Right.
done the whole Covent Garden thing and the busking in Birmingham thing. And I went,
Yeah.
right, let's become an entertainer. Um,
Yeah.
Became a full-time entertainer.
Mhm.
Started as a kids entertainer because it was easy. Everyone needs kids
Yeah.
entertainment. Everyone needs kids
Yeah.
parties. Had a ready-made market through connections at Warwick Castle where I'd worked. Became a jester.
Right. Yeah.
Completely created a new persona, and had
Mm.
no idea that for the better part of 15 years that was the best thing I could have done, because it just
Wow.
suited this way of thinking and working.
Yeah.
There was chaos, but there was just amazing experiences.
Yeah.
And that carried on until COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then from lockdown, from the day we were all locked down, for the following 2 weeks, I lost a year's worth of work like that. I had phone call after
Right.
email after email after phone call saying, we've got to cancel. We don't know what we're going to do. And I went from the best year I'd had planned to the single worst. And
Yeah.
that sort of tied in with other things to lead me to here.
Mm-hmm.
So the family side is 2004 when my
Mm-hmm.
first son was born. Like any parents, this is great, beautiful blue-eyed boy. He's wonderful.
Yeah.
By the time he was 3, he'd been expelled from his first preschool.
Wow.
And that led to changing preschool, a nursery nurse saying, look, I think he may have autism. Would you mind if we get him assessed?
Okay.
I'm paraphrasing. That's not what she said. Anyone that
Yeah.
hears us and goes, how dare she? She didn't. She said, he really reminds me of my son
Yeah.
which is a much better way of doing it.
Yeah.
That led to him getting a diagnosis of autism.
Mm-hmm.
His younger brother then, about 18 months later, again, 2010, he was diagnosed autistic as well. So by 2009, 10, we suddenly have got autism in the house.
Right.
And like most parents go, what on earth is this?
Yeah.
However, we were faced with the same kind of conversations that most parents were faced with then, which was professionals, clinicians saying, can't, won't, never will. We've got to struggle. Education will be difficult. No friends. And
Yeah.
we would look at R2 and go, yeah, okay, we can see difference, but I don't buy that. So we became obsessive about this, about autism, about everything it meant. Attended workshops, seminars, read books, did whatever we could. And then within 15 months, had started talking to other parents, offering support to them in an advocacy role, sort of guiding parents through the same process we'd been through, which never stopped. And we were told it was probably, there was a genetic component to all of these things. At birth diagnosis, completely denied it. The short version of that is by 2019, just before lockdown, we already knew my wife was autistic. She'd known for about 6 years by then.
Okay.
I had been told I likely had ADHD at that point, hadn't got a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And then just before lockdown, I'd had a spectacularly bad year, oddly, which was a really strange thing. And December 19 had a full-scale nervous breakdown. Couldn't cope, couldn't understand why 35 jobs, couldn't understand why the entertainment was so difficult. And through the sobbing and the I don't want to be here anymore conversations I had, I was asked by my parents and my wife, what do you think will help? And I said, a diagnosis. I need to know if this ADHD thing is the reason that life is so hard. And if it is, and this is where I now know I wasn't quite right, but at the time, if it is, I know there's medication, and what I read tells me it can make a world of difference.
Okay.
To that. Now, I was wrong in what the medication does, but I was right that it makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
So I got my diagnosis. And then when all the entertaining in person walked out the door in March, I had to do a very ADHD thing, which was park my own understanding of what it meant to be on this medication and just figure out how to make money again. Right? It's the entrepreneurial spirit. I pivoted, started doing everything online, created a home studio, was performing and entertaining to the corporate market online, as teaching people to juggle. And because ADHD and autism were so here all the time in my mind at that point, when I taught people to juggle, the mindfulness, I kept referencing ADHD, I kept referencing autism. And people started to say, you talk about this a lot. You seem to know about this. Talk about it in a different way. Can you talk about it in a work context? Which then led me to go, this is where I think I need to be. This is I've got 2 children who at that point were 15 and 16, who were, struggling through school. We knew they were going to be looking for the world of work. And I said, I can't have them have the same experience as me because people don't understand. That wouldn't be right. So I just started to say yes. If somebody said, can you run a workshop on ADHD? Okay. Now, I was diagnosed for months at that point. I was by no means an expert. No one's an expert after they've got their own diagnosis, right? But I had spent years before learning about autism, and therefore had been learning about ADHD and everything else. So I got information sort of stored, and I went away and I researched and I delivered, and that led to more people asking, which leads me to now having a consultancy called Think Neurodiversity, working with global brands of hundreds of thousands of people down to, you know, companies with no more than 6 people, and doing my best to make the conversation sensible, to make the conversation understandable, and the key message all the time is I want everyone, when they think neurodiversity, to remember what you're talking about is a person, not a label. You're talking about, yes, brains operate differently. Yes, we think things differently, but we ultimately are people, and we just want to be accepted and enabled to be able to do our best work wherever that is. Because I've never met somebody who's neurodivergent who wanted to be seen as a problem to be solved.
Yeah.
And yet that's still kind of somehow where we are. So that's where I end up today. And it's, you know, I'm blessed that my former career as an entertainer and some of the other customer service roles I did meant this is what I do. I talk.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, and where we started the conversation, which is when you said about, you know, your experience of work before, say, you got into entertaining and all of those jobs and that, you know, all of that, you know, all of that learning, all of those experiences now kind of feeds into what you're doing, you know, because you know what it's like, you know, having gone into those different spaces and some of those challenges. So it all kind of plays a part, doesn't it, in terms of where we end up, you know. Yeah.
When I work with managers now struggling, I remember managing people badly when I was a manager. I know I did that because I didn't know somebody was autistic, had ADHD, whatever, and I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know it was me either at the time. But now I can look at managers struggling, and I'm very much of the mindset of, look, I'm not going to point the finger at you and wag my finger at you should do better and you're being mean. And I don't believe in that. I believe in, you don't know what you don't know, but if you're asking for help, I'll do my very best to make this easy to understand so that you can do your best to support people. If I do that well, then long may it continue.
Yeah. And when organizations are asking you to sort of like come in and talk about, you know, whether that be your own experience. And I remember the one thing I remember you saying when we first met was, you know, you're just one person, you know, with your lived experience, and that could be very different and will be vastly different, you know, to other people with you know, other elements of sort of neurodifference and neurodiversity. But what are some of the main challenges that organizations come to you with? So when they come to you and they want you to come in and speak, you know, what is it around? Is it around understanding individuals with neurodiversity? Is it around the adjustments, how people work? So, you know, what's the thing? What leads them to picking up the phone?
Look, you could summarize it with one phrase. We don't want to get it wrong.
Right.
That's typically in amongst all the different words that are said. What I'm basically hearing is, Matt, we're terrified. We don't want to get it wrong because we know there are consequences if we do. Help. Now, the real answer to that is, okay, so should we step back, refocus, and let's focus on how to get it right, because it's a much better approach, and then dig into what's your version of wrong anyway. Now, that can be reasonable adjustments. That can be understanding all these different conditions because we hear about them so often. It can be about how do we make team dynamics work better? How do we help people understand each other? And typically it's bits of everything. I've worked with organizations where we've had an issue with one person, but it's flagged up that actually we can't ignore this. I've worked with other organizations who go, look, we know we've got tons of people with neurodivergent conditions. We just haven't really done anything about that. And we now know that perhaps we need to know a bit more, and everything in between. So for me, it's always, hearing what their concerns are, and then starting by reflecting it back and going, okay, let's understand, let's reverse engineer the process.
Yeah.
Okay, you've come to me with that question, why? And it's always what happened. Either what happened or what are you scared of happening?
Yeah.
Right. And once I get that honesty and that understanding, then I have a starting point. And look, the start point is always at the top of the tree.
Yeah.
So whoever approaches me, one of my first asks is, if your senior leadership team, if your suites are not invested in this conversation, it's kind of a tick box. Now, you want to pay me to be a tick box, that's up to you, but your staff are going to know about it.
Yeah.
But if your leaders are invested in, we understand why this is important, and we are saying it's important, the message as it comes sort of through to everyone else in the organization is stronger and is more coherent. So I always work with people at the top first. And then we do the general awareness.
Yeah. Very, very similar, very similar, I think, in terms of, my approach. And I know a lot of other consultants in this space, it has to start from the top, as you say. Otherwise, it can just be that tick box thing. Let's just sort. You mentioned something there about, so I'm going to sort of segue into talking about the prevalence of neurodivergence, and particularly around. So I'm seeing with employee networks, I'm seeing a couple of things. I'm either seeing employee networks springing up just around focusing on neurodivergence, or I'm seeing neurodivergence sometimes put in with, say, for example, disability networks. And I don't know what your view is and whether you do or don't have a preference. And also the prevalence, though, as well. So the prevalence of diagnoses and, they're almost like a bit of the noise around that. So what are your thoughts on this space?
All right, let's go numbers first, then talk about the groups, because I suppose it factors in. If you do any searches online, UK figures will very often say it's estimated 15% of the population across all ages are neurodivergent by one condition.
Right.
By known to have one condition. Right.
Okay.
Now, fine. If you go global, it tends to be about 20%, and you can break it down by various things. So autism is about 1 to 2%, ADHD they quoted about 4%, Tourette's at about 0.5%, etc. Fine.
Right.
The figures are all based on, and here's where I trip over my words, but I'll try, epidemiological statistical profiling. Right. And the way it was described to me is, when we see that Ant and Dec's Saturday Night Takeaway got 250 million people watch it.
Right.
We didn't ask 250 million people, but a small sample said they'd share their data with Radar, and they go, oh, well, that. So that's how we get those figures.
Yeah.
Right. Fine. So it's a fairly good modeling system. But because diagnosis takes so long, because the time to get an assessment, and let's just talk autism and ADHD for a minute, because the wait times are taking so long, because more people than ever, particularly since COVID, adults, women, are seeking assessments and diagnosis. There are missing figures in there, in my opinion. I don't think they've been updated quite, and can't be really updated quite as quickly as they can. So if we start to factor in a bit more of the unknown, the people struggling who don't know, the people struggling who can't get a diagnosis, I believe wholeheartedly we could be looking anywhere between 25 and 30% in the UK. We've got to factor in genetics, right? Like me, I came to my knowledge through my children. But I could be one of those parents who have that experience. I went, not me, though. I was fine. I didn't have any problems despite being sacked 30 times. No, I'm not. Right. And there are those parents who don't ever get there and yet live and are. So those figures are higher than we think. That's sort of the point one.
Yeah.
In terms of the ERGs, it's fascinating. And you're right. I think it depends on the size and the scale of the organization. It depends on how comfortable they are with the conversations as well.
Yeah.
Where I see neurodivergence and neurodiversity sort of lumped in, to use a phrase, with with wider disability, I think it's either smaller organizations where they feel that it's not appropriate to have lots and lots and lots and lots of ERGs.
Yeah.
Or where, oddly, they haven't had enough conversations within to know that it affects more people than they think.
Right. Yeah. So it kind of links to that first point almost about the prevalence and people not knowing. Yeah. That makes sense.
It's the knowledge that they don't know what they don't know. There's that phrase again.
Yeah.
So when I then sit and say, okay, let's call it 20%, right? If you've got an organization of 100 people and I tell you that 20% potentially based on stats are neurodivergent, is it worth thinking that an ERG for that cohort might be worthwhile? And that's where people start to think, okay, but they haven't said anything. Have you made them feel that they could yet? Right?
Yeah.
Where we've got separate groups, whether it's a neurodiversity one or an ADHD and an autism and a dyslexia, I think that tends to go along with scale, where there's more employees, and it tends to go along with where there are already more confident voices. I don't think, I try to be kinder about this, I don't think there's a right or a wrong way, because it is scale dependent, it's resource dependent, it's you know yourself, ERGs can take a lot of admin, a lot of management, but I do believe that done well, they are amongst the most useful resources for people just to say, oh, this is me. But listen, got wrong, they make people feel uncomfortable. I mentor a client, and the ERG, so named the disability group, as it's called in their organization, is a public forum that anyone can see what's shared on the Teams chat, whether they're part of that or not. And she's like, I'm not joining that. I'm not putting myself above the parapet and telling everyone that. I'm uncomfortable. So again, there's we tried, but it was a bit pulled that one off. But yeah, there is a difference. I don't think it's right or wrong. I do think it's scale based and just that knowledge of, this isn't us yet.
It's an interesting one, and as you were talking, certainly when you think about, especially with the stats, even if you said it's 15%, so even if you said it's the lower end, that's still a lot of people, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? So whether it's the 15 or it's the 30, it's still a lot of people. And it does make you think. What I started thinking about was, we know that within neurodivergence, we know that in terms of, and I'm going to defer to you on this, but some of the things that organizations can do to become more inclusive of individuals who are neurodivergent actually benefit everyone, if that makes, the benefits are so wide, you almost want to actually there is like a real benefit actually in organizations understanding this, because it makes it easier for everyone in terms of how we work and how we work as teams, right?
Almost every time, if you could start by explaining that, it would make the conversation about reasonable adjustments so much easier. It just would. And the way I tend to describe it is, okay, let's say that John's the guy in the office, and John's the one with ADHD and autism, right? And John can't cope with the open plan office. He can't cope with the hot desking. It doesn't suit him. He's struggling. And he's the one that says, look, can we just have some fixed workstations that we can book? Because I need that ability to book a space, know where I'm going to work when I'm on my office day, because then it reduces my anxiety. I guarantee you, if that's approved, hundreds of other people in the organization will be going, oh, John, let me buy you a drink. Right, let me buy you a beer, man, because I didn't think we could ask for that, because we've been told it's hot desking. But I even Radio 2, I heard yesterday, have switched to hot desking, right? BBC. And I heard 3 presenters talking about it, and you could hear the undercurrent of, I hate this. I didn't sign up for this. So it's going to take that one person to go, is there a way we can, right? So you're right. Very often reasonable adjustments when we talk neurodivergent conditions are very simple. They're very low cost. They're very easy to implement. And the actual impact, in terms of negative impact that they have on anyone else, is minimal to zero, but the
Yeah.
positive impact, massive.
Yeah. And
Massive. And
massive, in a much wider way as well, as you
it is.
say.
It
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
really is, because so one of the things I talk about in this conversation, I spoke to a wonderful employment lawyer, Mandy Owlak from
Hmm.
Talem Laws, wonderful lady, and she really helped me clarify this. The whole point of a reasonable adjustment is to remove disadvantage, remove perceived disadvantage. Right?
Right.
That's the starting point. Great.
Hmm.
If somebody's saying, I feel disadvantaged because what they're saying is, I want to be able to do the best work that I can,
Mm. Mm.
but I don't feel like this is the environment that's conducive to that. Help.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
if the manager or the HR function or whomever can go, right, okay, if we remove that disadvantage, what do? We potentially enable you. We keep you in your role. We prevent losing
Mm.
days to sick. Where in any of those three positives is there something to be perceived as, oh, I think we need to think about whether we should or could or need to be
Mm.
doing this?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. We need to be
Yeah.
saying, okay, help us understand what you need and why. Give us some context. Let us go away and figure out what's possible, and we'll meet. We'll
Yeah.
meet somewhere in the middle, perhaps. But if we start doing that more regularly, more people will start feeling more able to ask.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not asking to change the world and change all the systems. That's not the case. We're just saying, I might need a little bit. Right. We joked at the
Yeah.
start about doing a thing while I was walking on a treadmill. Why? Because at that point, I wasn't exercising enough and my anxiety had gone through the roof. And I'm still trying to do
Right.
8-hour, 9-hour days on here. So I bought a standing desk and a treadmill so I could walk and work. Why? Because a
Nice.
reasonable adjustment is thinking on my feet.
Mm. Yeah.
If that's all it takes,
Yeah.
is somebody being allowed to stand and walk.
Yeah.
What is the detriment to that?
Yeah.
But we have to be able to understand that it's not somebody being difficult, it's somebody finding things difficult.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
that's where I particularly have seen it made more difficult.
Yeah.
When managers think, oh, they're just being awkward. No, they're not. Nobody
No.
asks for fun. Nobody puts their hand up for fun.
Yeah.
They put their hand up because they're
Yeah.
struggling and because they're exhausted from struggling.
Yeah. As you were talking there about the adjustments and just almost like on a very sort of like low level, I remember, when I was working in finance, I remember working with a lot of senior finance individuals who, if we were in an office, it was say mainly open plan, but the finance director or the CFO or
Yeah.
financial controller might have an office with a closed door. I always used to say when I was on my way out, I'd always say to them, because a lot of firms have these things about open door policy, which
Yeah.
was taken to mean literally your door must be left open all the
Yeah.
time. But I always used to say on the way out, especially if I knew that the individual was quite introverted and quite shy, I always used to say, do you want the door open or closed? Because
Yeah.
and sometimes a lot of the time actually they'd say open is what they would first say, and they'd say no, closed please.
Yeah.
Because really they wanted their door closed,
Yeah.
but they kind of felt pressured that the door should always be
Absolutely.
left open.
No, I completely agree. I posted something last week on LinkedIn here, and then it's somebody goes, yeah, people have sort of jumped in and gone, I need some movement, start the movement. I'm going, oh, okay, I'm not sure I'm ready for that. But the whole point was, I firmly believe where possible, logistically,
Yeah.
every office space, every environment should have a decompression space.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
just for neurodivergent staff,
Yeah.
for everyone.
Yeah.
Because when we
Absolutely.
come out of that meeting or off that call and we're sky high and we're raging or we're upset,
Yeah.
just knowing that I could take a do not disturb sign, stick it on a door and go, I'm having 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And that room needs nothing. It needs no fancy furniture, no sparkly lights. It's not to stimulate. It's just to go and breathe.
Yeah.
There's water, there's coffee, there's wherever in it, and breathe. If every office space had somewhere like that, far fewer people would reach critical burnout as quickly as they do, because they'd be able to say, I'm just taking a minute, I'll be back. In my day, in the 90s, that was called taking a cigarette break.
Yes. Yeah. Very true.
I'm not
Yeah.
promoting smoking, but this is the analogy I use a lot. When I smoked, and I smoked heavily as a younger guy, right? Self-soothing because of autism. Me taking regular cigarette breaks wasn't really because I like smoking. It was to decompress somewhere that wasn't my desk.
Right.
That's all I was doing. And the irony is, I remember stopping smoking, trying my very best to stop smoking. Did what I always do. I announced it to everyone in there. Well, I've stopped smoking. Aren't I wonderful? I've quit smoking. Look at me. Did it this weekend. Hey. And then came up a call, was really discombobulated, just got up, went to walk outside. And I remember the director going, Matt, where are you going? I'm just going outside. I just need a minute. Yeah, but lunch is at 1 o'clock. Yeah, but I just need a minute. No, lunch at 1 o'clock, sit down, carry on. I went, wait a minute. If I was still smoking, would you have stopped me? Well, no, because you're a smoker. Fine, I'm smoking again. I'm off to get some cigarettes and then I'm having my 5 minutes, which is a ridiculous state of play.
Yeah.
But all I was saying was, give me 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Just
Give me
chat. Now that's the decompression room. That's a reasonable adjustment.
I love that.
Everyone.
I love that. I want to see that movement started, Matt.
Yeah.
I tell you what I want in the decompression room. I want a nice armchair.
Yes.
I want some books and a little side table. That's what I'd love.
And that's it, right? Can you imagine if that's all you had? And here's one little addendum to that. Please don't have the decompression chamber be the same as the multi-faith room or the feeding room for ladies that may have this. Don't.
Yeah.
I know if you're limited on space, it's hard, but don't think, is it okay if we, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We can't do that. It's just a separate, even a corner is fine, but somewhere. Right. Yeah. But this is that point, right? And actually, if you go to really well functioning ERGs with neurodivergent people, I guarantee they've already asked for that. I guarantee we've had conversations the world over about, oh, wouldn't it be good if?
Yeah. I love that. Honestly, it's such a straightforward one. And it leads on nicely, I guess, into our last thing in terms of tips. What tips for individuals and organizations that want to either have more of these sorts of conversations or just the sorts of things that they can and should be doing to get the conversation going, to create space to do the right thing.
Okay, so I think my number one at the moment is see this as a conversation about people. Start with people, not labels.
Yeah.
And I know people say, but we've got to think about the labels to help. No, you don't. You've just got to look at how many days sick have been taken off due to stress, anxiety, and depression in the past year. Because if we look at labour force surveys, we know we could save about 20% of those if people with neurodivergent conditions and other needs were being met in the workplace. So start with people. That's number one. Right. Number two, yes, start sharing some information. Start the ERG, even if there's only one person in it or no one in it. Suggest it. Put a post out that says we've been made aware that there are potentially 15% of the UK population who identify as neurodivergent. We think it's time we had an employee resource group for neurodivergent individuals in our business. Would anyone be interested? Here's a private email address to reply to if you are. Private. Yeah. Right? Yeah. We're not outing people, right? And now this is a bit of a contradiction of myself here. If you have somebody in your senior team who is neurodivergent, and there always is, it would be so good if they could be brave enough to join the ERG, brave enough to say, actually, you know what, I've got here and I'm dyslexic. I've got here and actually I know I've got ADHD. Yeah. And that's okay. That's good. I welcome your ADHD, you welcome mine. Because when we see the people at the top saying it, we feel more confident to say it ourselves, right? That's just a fact. But we shouldn't force the issue. This is not about you have to tell us if you're neurodivergent. You have to tell us if you're waiting. You have to tell us exactly what it means. If you are, we'd love to support you. Yeah. What would that look like for you? And I think if it starts with those open desire to help questions, you stand more chance of people thinking this is for the right reasons. But again, I'll go right back to what I said at the beginning. If people perceive that they're being seen as problems to be solved, no one's ever going to join the ERG. No one's ever going to put their head above the parapet because they think that their job is on the line if they do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think, you know, similar to some of the other ERGs that we got around things like disability, there is something around, you know, feeling that risk of, well, if I'm now saying that I need adjustments or that there are things that affect my work, you know, how does that look? And there is still stigma associated with, you know, with certain neurodivergent conditions, especially, you know, for those of us that are of a certain generation.
Yeah.
There is a lot more stigma and a lot more, you know, misunderstanding of what it looks like and all of those sorts
Yeah.
of things. So there are all those mental barriers to get over as
But
well.
again, here's what I think is have the conversation about everyone. So why
Yeah.
don't we do sort of lunch and learns about reasonable adjustments, not for autism, not for ADHD, just
So
did you know what reasonable adjustments are and how to ask for them? Do you know where to find the reasonable adjustment policy? Please have one, right? Do you know where to find the policy? And do you know who to approach if you think you might need one for any reason? If we start with a conversation like that, that makes everyone think, oh, this is normal. I don't have to be an issue to ask. It's just, I didn't know I could. Now we're on the right track. Now we're making it just seem like this is how the business operates.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Seeing people as people, right?
Yeah, that's it.
With different individual needs. Yeah.
That's absolutely it. Absolutely it. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Amazing. Matt, it's been so good to speak to you
Thank you.
today.
And you.
And and for anybody that's listening to us live, because I know a lot of people listen on their Friday mornings, getting ready for their work at home day or their half day working at home, etc. Thank you so much for listening. And if you've listened on the replay again, you know, thank you for sparing a half an hour listening to this. Obviously, if you've got any questions around neurodiversity and what that work could look like, you know, please do reach out to Matt here on LinkedIn. I've heard nothing but good things for the organisations that you've been into. So yeah, it's been great. Matt, thank you again, and have an amazing weekend. Thanks everyone for listening.
And you, enjoy your walks, and thank you.
I will
I'll speak to you soon.
do. Thanks, Matt.
Cheers.